Let's look at the difference between observational studies and controlled experiments. So an observational study observes individuals. It'll measure the variables of interest, so we'll measure the explanatory and the response variable, but it does not attempt to influence or manipulate anything, so that we're not trying to change what happens to the response variable, we're just recording that. So there's no manipulation of factors. So if you're into sci-fi, this is a lot like Star Trek, where this other civilization is playing the observer role. They don't interfere, they don't share their technology, things like that. They're just watching to see what happens. All right, the other side of the coin here is the controlled experiment. So in a controlled experiment, the researcher attempts to influence the response variable. You're going to intentionally apply treatment to individuals. And it usually has at least two groups. So one group is a control group and the other is a treatment group, so that you have kind of a baseline to compare against to see if the treatment you applied actually caused the change in the response variable. So this might be more like a show like Stargate, where they come in and they say, oh, you guys are being beaten up by these really awful other people, so here, we'll give you all of our technology and everything else so you can fend them off. Okay, so observational study is just watching. Controlled experiment, you're trying to manipulate the outcome there. All right, so on your notes, you have some examples. I would love for you to go ahead and read through those. Pause the video, see if you can decide, are they a study or an experiment? Okay, so hopefully you gave those a try. Let's look at this first one. A student watched picnickers with a large cooler of soft drinks to see whether teenagers were less likely than adults to choose diet soft drinks over regular soft drinks. So there's no manipulation of factors going on here. So this is going to be an observational study. So fun story, when I was taking an intro to stats class, our professor thought it would be good practice of data collection if he sent us to some grocery stores to write down the weights of 30 turkeys. So he sent us out around the holidays when there were plenty of frozen turkeys to go through. But as we're writing down the weights of these turkeys, somebody from store security came by and detained us. I think they thought we were competitive shopping for another grocery store. We're like, we're just getting data for our stats class. So this example too could be really creepy. If you were standing in a park with a pair of binoculars looking what people are taking out of their cooler, I would not be surprised if somebody came and talked to you and thought that was a little bit sketchy. So definitely a study because you're watching people, but always something to keep in mind when you're doing that kind of research is making sure you're not putting yourself in a situation where people are really wondering what's going on. All right, violent cartoons. A group of boys is randomly divided into two groups. One group watches violent cartoons for an hour, and the other group watches cartoons without violence for an hour. The boys are then observed to see how many violent actions they take in the next 2 hours, and the groups are compared. So here we've divided them into groups and we've set one group in front of a particular cartoon and the other group in front of a different cartoon. So we're manipulating what's going on. That's going to make this an experiment. Blind taste test. A researcher wonders whether the order in which people taste beverages influences their preference. Students are told by the researcher to drink from 2 unmarked cups. The researcher assigns one group of students to drink Coke first and then Pepsi. The other group does the opposite, Pepsi and then Coke. The subjects are asked whether they prefer the first or second beverage. Okay, so we are doing something here that makes this an experiment. The medical records of people who live near high power lines are compared with the medical records of people who do not live near high power lines to see whether people living near high power lines are more likely to have cancer. So this one, it looks like we're just comparing records, so we're not doing anything to these people. So this is going to be an observational study. And one thing to note with this, even if I wasn't clued in by the context to this was a study, this would be unethical to do as an experiment, which is kind of another clue that this would have to be a study. If I really think that those high power lines are causing cancer, I can't randomly assign some people to go live there. That would be unethical. Okay, so which kind of leads into this next one. So this is really a sad day in US history. This is a true story. Much controversy arose over research involving patients with syphilis who were not given a treatment that could have cured them. Their health was followed for years after they were found to have syphilis. So syphilis can have really serious health impacts on people, especially if it's left untreated for a long period of time. So the fact that they actually had a treatment and chose not to give it to these people is really reprehensible. If you look into this further, you'll realize there's some racial issues, some socioeconomic issues going on in this research, as well as a really terrible thing. But because nothing was done, we would classify this as an observational study. All right, quality control. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration randomly selects a sample of Bayer aspirin tablets. The amount of aspirin in each tablet is measured for accuracy. Now, if you know much about the testing for this, then you have to smash up these pills or in some way kind of take them apart, run them through a machine. So they are doing something, but the thing that they're doing has no intent to change the outcome, right? So you are testing this stuff. You are physically doing something to it to find out what this measurement is. But what you're doing doesn't change the measurement. So it's not going to change the amount of aspirin in each tablet. So for that reason, this is also going to be an observational study. Okay, so just because you're doing something doesn't mean that it's going to have to be an experiment. The key is that you're doing something with the intent or goal of it, or it has, even if it's unintended, it somehow changes the response variable, then you're looking at an experiment. Magnetic bracelets. Cruise ship passengers are given magnetic bracelets, which they agree to wear in an attempt to eliminate or diminish the effects of motion sickness. Right, so this one is going to be an experiment because we are giving them these bracelets.